episode number 95, IRONMAN Lake Placid with Gina Bencivenga. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with my friend Gina Bencivenga about her recent race experience at IRONMAN Lake Placid in beautiful upstate New York, where she had a time of 11 hours, 43 minutes, and 1 second, which was a PR from her previous race there. Gina has been doing triathlons for several years now, but this one was her second attempt at this distance. This race took place on July 22nd, 2018, and the temperature on race day was 46 degrees, rising to 79, and the water temperature was 74 degrees. Also notable to mention about this race was it was pouring rain with some hail on the bike. Welcome to the show, Gina. I look forward to hearing about your race experience at Lake Placid.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. So what made you want to do this race again?
If you asked me last year after I did Ironman Lake Placid the first time, I would have said I was never doing it again. But like most athletes that have done either a half Ironman or a full Ironman or even a sprint, once they do one, they're hooked and then they want to do another one. So it was shortly after, I think it was Monday, when you're allowed to register early if you just completed the group of people that I did last year with. We all decided that we were going to do it again and signed up, and it was a beautiful course last year, so we just figured why not do it again. And it's one of the most known courses in Ironman, and this is their 20-year anniversary there, so it just seemed appropriate, and it's a great course, so That's why we went.
So how's your training going into this race?
Personally this last year for training for this particular race, was much more challenged than the previous one, more on the personal side between work and family and balance and that kind of thing. But when it comes down to it, doing the actual, training on a given day, I executed it, never missed, a training that I was supposed to do. Probably would have liked to have had a little bit more energy on some of them. But like I said, I didn't miss a training day. I made sure that every single, particular workout that I was supposed to do, I did.
Okay.
And mentally that makes me feel better for those that when I don't feel physically as good.
Right. Now, going into this race, what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts?
I think I had a 5,000 yard swim that was my max for swim. My longest bike was 6 hours and 20 minutes. And my longest run was in one day I did, a double brick where I did a 2-hour run, a 1-hour bike, and a 2-hour run.
Nice. So what did those miles look like on the runs?
Each one was a little bit over 10 miles. So I think that day I did about 21 and change.
Wow. That's awesome. Were you doing bricks in training?
Almost every workout I had except for Mondays was just a swim. All the other days I always had bricks. There was never just one. It was always a swim bike, or it was a bike run, or sometimes it was all three.
Wow. So going into this race, how much of your training was outside versus inside?
Unfortunately, majority of my training rides for the bike were indoors. Not because of anything other than work-life balance. I just had a lot of different things going on. So I would sometimes get up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning to get in a 5-hour training ride. It wasn't ideal, but it was what I needed to do to get through, and get my training done. So, I would say my first time outdoors on the bike was actually in May. And all the other ones except for my long rides on Saturdays were indoors. All my runs, for the most part, I tried doing as many of those outside as possible. But there were a good a handful that were on the treadmill as well.
Okay. So what were you using for nutrition for the training that you were doing?
I used Tailwind last year, and I thought that was an issue for me, but I actually realized that it wasn't so much the Tailwind that was the issue. It was actually my nutrition leading up to the race that I think I failed. I did not eat almost anything the Saturday before the race last year, just out of nerves. And I think that really played a factor in my performance on race day. So I had a very specific nutritional plan leading up the week before, and then even more specific leading up to the Friday, Saturday before. It was an extreme carbohydrate load that I think really, really played a difference in terms of my overall feeling on the bike.
Okay. Now, in regards to your training going into this race, what specific workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
I don't know if there was anything specific about the training for this particular race. I think having the mindset last year that I did it, just having that feeling of, I know I can do it. Even when you doubt yourself, and I did doubt myself a couple times this past year in training, like, how did I do that? You just somewhat forget that you were able to do it. But knowing that you did and you somehow made it through, even when, a 2-hour bike ride just gave you a lot of challenges on a particular day, or doing that last workout, that last long workout leading up to, your Ironman, where you're like, I just don't know how I did this, because you're sheerly exhausted. You just do it. You get it done.
All right. I mean, I remember last year you went over 200 days in a row without ever missing a workout.
Yeah, no, I didn't miss one this year either. I was very fortunate. I only got sick once. It was in the middle of February. And I powered through. I worked the fever out of me. I think it lasted for 3 days, but I still every single day got up. I don't even need an alarm clock. I am up at 4 a.m. every single morning. Rain or shine, my workout gets done. That's the first thing I do in the morning. I had a handful, I'd say less than 6 days where just because of my own personal circumstances, I wasn't able to finish the workouts in the morning, and I had to do an evening workout, which I hate. It is just not ideal for me. But there was, like I said, maybe 6 days that I had to split it up and do a morning and then an evening. But other than that, I get them done between, work week, Monday through Friday, anywhere between sometimes 3 to 7 in the morning. I get them done. And then on the weekends, obviously, it could be anywhere between 4 to 8 hours.
Okay. Now, what was the most hours you trained in 1 week this time?
The most hours I trained, my highest peak week, my peak week was 24 hours and change.
Wow.
Yep.
Now, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train?
Yeah, there are a lot. There were a lot of days that I really just had to drag myself and just say, okay, just do it. Especially the pool during the winter. It was tough. It was tough to just get motivated. We had a couple really bad snowstorms here where, I had to shovel 2 feet of snow before I even got to the pool. So those days were just, they were kind of mentally challenging, but still did it. Didn't miss a day.
Wow. So when you're not training, what are you doing?
Well, I have 2 kids. One's 12, one's 10. So typically I'm running around after their sports, between soccer and football, tennis, lacrosse. I was all over the place between fields throughout the entire training season. There were days that I would put my trainer right on the field and I would watch them either practice or play a game, and I'd get my workout in there. And then in addition to them, I have a full-time job and a part-time job. So I work in the medical field, and that's my full-time job. And then my part-time job, I'm a personal trainer. And I was actually training anywhere between, 3 to 5 clients throughout all of this as well. So
wow. So how big of an issue was balancing life, work, and training?
It was challenging for a type A personality, for someone that likes structure, for someone that, doesn't know how to not do something that's asked of them or a training plan. It was definitely challenging, but again, it's all time management. You just have to be down to the minute sometimes. Like I knew if I woke up 5 minutes after I was supposed to work out, start my workout, that would mess up everything. So I think it was just ingrained in me. I just knew that the only way I was going to get it done is if I time managed appropriately.
That makes sense. Going into this race at Lake Placid, what sacrifice was the most difficult that you had to make? Personal,
absolutely. I kept telling my kids that this is the last year I was going to do a full Ironman for a while, that I understood what it meant for them. It's one thing to say that I got up early before maybe they even went, get up out of bed in the morning to get my training done. But that also had consequences. I was going to bed at 8:30 every night because I was exhausted. So, after putting in a full day of work, driving them around to all their activities, they weren't looking to go to bed until 9:30, and I was exhausted and I was hitting the bed at like 8:00. So they did have a sacrifice. They lost out on that time with me, which is something that I took very seriously. So, that's why I'm going to put a hold on the full Ironmans for a few years until they get a little bit older, and really just focus in on the half irons and the different, races that I want to get done. I'm going to really start focusing back on running. I have a Boston qualifying race coming up, so I'd like to run Boston again. Things that are a little bit more manageable.
That makes sense. So to shift gears and talk a little bit more race specific, what was your taper like going into this race?
I had my peak week was 3 weeks out, and then I tapered down. My second week was 17 hours. My last week was 12 hours. So, I think even at 17 hours where you're thinking, I'm racing in 2 weeks, that seems like a lot. I actually recovered really well. So although looking at it on paper, it's like daunting and you're like, why am I still training this much? I recovered really well. And by the time race day came, my legs felt great. I wasn't tired. I wasn't mentally tired. I made sure that I got really good sleep that last week. Which I never do. I think there was 2 days I took a nap, just to really, physically and mentally prepare myself. So that was different from the previous year as well.
Okay. Now, when did you actually start traveling to Lake Placid?
We went up on Thursday, so got there Thursday afternoon around 4 or so. For me personally, that was actually mentally better. We went up on a Wednesday last year, and I think the extra day was actually just an extra day of stress. It was, it gave you more time to think. And I liked actually going up a day later and, getting up there, getting yourself situated, wherever you were staying. In our case, we stayed at a house, and then Friday went, registered, got our bibs, packet pickup, did your weigh in, that kind of thing. And then Saturday, bike drop off. And once the bike drop off was done, went home and rested the entire day, like didn't do anything else. So it was kind of like bam, bam, bam. Didn't give you too much time to overthink things. But to get a little bit acclimated to your surroundings, and then it was race day. So, I actually liked doing it, not being up there too much time ahead of time. I think that was definitely a pro for me.
Okay. Now, what was the check-in process like in comparison to last year?
We checked in this year on the Friday, where last year we checked in on a Thursday. So when we checked in on the Thursday last year, no one was there. You pretty much walked in and there was 20 different people waiting to help you. On Friday, we did go in the morning, but there were a substantial, larger crowd there, to check in. But overall, it was still pretty easy. I think we were in and out in under half an hour. So, it didn't take long at all.
Okay. If you compare the swag that you got this year for the 20th anniversary to last year where it wasn't, was there much of a difference?
No, it was the same. There was nothing really different, exactly the same. Hat at the end, shirt at the end, your medal obviously at the end. Going into it, we got a bag that looked very similar. It was a little bit variation from the bag that we got the previous year. But other than that, it was really the same. I didn't notice anything different.
Okay. What was the last workout that you did before the race?
The last workout I did was on Friday, and it was a swim bike run. The swim was 1,100 yards. The bike was 40 minutes. The run was 20 minutes. All like zone 1. Nothing crazy.
Okay. Did you have any issues with your bike before you checked it in?
No issues with the bike.
That's great. I've had some people on here where they have issues with a bike, and it's like brake rubbing or anything from just the Di2 isn't working. But that's good that you don't have any issues with it.
Yep. Nope. Everything was good.
So what kind of meal did you want to have the day before the race? You had mentioned carbo loading.
Yeah. So, during my previous year of training, I was very, very limited on carbohydrates. My carbohydrates pretty much consisted of fruit and vegetables. And I didn't have a lot of, starch carbohydrates or anything like that, anything that was long sustaining. So I looked at changing that around and actually started looking at carbohydrates in total. So the Friday before the race, I had about 400 grams of carbohydrates. The Saturday, I had about 550 grams of carbohydrates. Smaller sizes, a lot throughout the day to kind of sustain that level. And even leading up to the week before, definitely picked up the carbohydrates. More so than, and reduce the protein. I was having like anywhere between 5 and 6 grams of protein at a time. Now I went down, or not grams, ounces. I went down to about 3 ounces per portion, on the protein. And that's where I really made my carbohydrates, take care of most of my caloric intake versus the protein.
Okay. Now with this nutrition right here, what did you actually have for breakfast the day before the race?
Breakfast the day before, I had 2 pieces of whole grain toast with some almond butter and a banana. That was my first breakfast. My second breakfast, I had 2 eggs with pretzels. I was eating a lot of pretzels to try to get the salt in as well as the carbohydrates. I had another 2 pieces of whole grain toast with grilled chicken and a small amount of salad. I didn't want to have too many greens, but a small amount of salad with some dressing. And then for dinner, I had a whole sweet potato, chicken, again, a small amount, about 3 ounces. And then I had a cup and a half of applesauce. Again, just the sugar content there. I also had a recovery drink, a clean recovery drink, as well as a fruit smoothie.
Okay. Now, what time were you trying to go to bed the night before the race?
I got to bed. I made it into bed for 7:30. Probably didn't fall asleep until about 8:30, somewhere around there. But the major difference is I actually slept. Last year I did not sleep at all. I just laid there for, a solid 6-7 hours, until I got up at 3. This year I actually slept. I got up on my own. I didn't have the alarm clock. I was definitely up by 3, and just maintained my normal morning regimen. My normal everyday regimen that I had, leading, all of my training sessions. So I didn't change a thing, which I think was also very helpful for me.
Okay. So what's your race day morning ritual look like before you leave the Airbnb where you're staying?
So typical, very routine, regimented person that I am, made coffee, had my coffee, and athletes can handle this because we're all the same. Made sure I went to the bathroom. That was like number 1 priority. I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable. Had my breakfast, which was sweet potato, maple syrup, applesauce. That was around 3:30 in the morning. Took a shower, got myself ready, put my kit on, put my tattoos on, drank a full bottle of water. And then I brought another full bottle of water and a banana to have an hour right before the swim. Got into the car with all of us, got our gear bags, our morning race bags together, and walked into transition and put my fuel on my bike, got my computer set up so that I had the map already loaded. I pumped my tires, checked the brakes, got, down to the lake, put my wetsuit on, all that good stuff. Same regimen that I would do for any other race day, just kept it the same.
Okay. What kind of PSI are you using for this course?
I did 115.
115? Okay.
Yep.
That worked pretty well for you?
It did, yeah. It was a difficult day weather-wise. It was kind of hard. It was cool, like you mentioned. It started out very cool in the morning. They were predicting it could get up into the mid-80s. So it was just kind of planning for everything. But it was extremely humid, obviously, with the significant amount of rain that we had. And it was extremely variable on both sides of the course. The first 20 miles, the first part of the course was where we got all the rain, the hail, the wind. And then the back half was sunny and warm and no wind. And it was bizarre, especially on the second loop. It was the exact same way. The first 20, rain, pour, wind. The back half, warm, sunny, no weather. It was just... Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Now, did you have an ideal number of how many calories you were going to hit per hour on the bike ride?
Yeah, again, train the way that you plan to have your race day. So, kept it the exact same. I used the tailwind. So I had both my turbo and my speed fill, both of them, making sure that every 10 minutes I was forcing myself. I have an alarm set on my computer monitor just to make sure that I'm drinking at least every 10 minutes, but also knowing that if I felt thirsty, just to drink more. But I had both of those so that I was getting in at least 100 calories an hour.
Okay. Now, going into this race, what was your mindset?
Knowing that this was going to be my last Ironman, for at least the foreseeable future, my only mindset, was to really enjoy it, just to take every leg of the race and enjoy it, because I knew it was going to be my last one for a while. I had this goal in mind, day one from when I signed up for the 2018 Lake Placid race last year, that my goal was to break 12 hours. Leading up into the race, I changed that goal because not only did they change the bike course, they were going to add elevation. It was going to be a different course. So I didn't want to put too much emphasis on the time, not knowing what that was going to look like. But also knowing the weather, seeing that it was going to be raining for a majority of the race. I knew that was potentially going to cause, some slowing down on the bike. So I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment. So within the last week or so, I changed my mindset that, just go out and enjoy it, be safe and go out and enjoy it. And that was really it.
Okay. Now, this is a rolling start for this race this year. Where did you see yourself at?
I started myself at 115, 120, and in hindsight, that was very cautious. I actually swam Syracuse, quite fast. And, I probably should have went to the 105, 110. But I also thought, this is a longer race. This is full. I have to do 2 loops, not 1. Don't go out there and, exhaust yourself on the first leg of the race. You're not going to, your whole race is not going to be dependent on the swim, where it's going to really be a matter of the bike and the run. So be smart about the swim. And I started off in 115, 120. I ended up, getting caught up behind some of the slower swimmers. Now, whether or not it was because they seated themselves, incorrectly, I don't know. But there was a lot of times on the first loop that I was swimming around people. So unfortunately that kind of, slowed my swim down a little bit, but, it is what it is. I placed myself where I thought it was going to be best for me. Sometimes you just can't, predict what other people are going to do. you kind of have to just go with it.
That makes sense. So you get to the swim. How does the overall swim go for your expectations?
I actually, I would have liked to probably get under 110. That was my first thought, is I wanted to swim in under 110. I swam it in like 111 and change. So it wasn't too far off, but I would have liked to have seen it been a bit quicker. And I know I could have. I really did. I got trapped in a lot of the areas. I was swimming in a pack where I had, 2-3 people in front of me, 2-3 people on each side of me. And there was really, all I could do was kind of stay within the pack until there was some type of movement. So I would have liked to have done it a little bit quicker, but I did the best that I could in the situation that I had. So that was it. I will say that there was, a lot of people struggle with getting swimmer's anxiety within that first 100, 200. I did both with the Ironman last year and this year. I went in and did exactly what you're supposed to do in the swim and start out easy, just start out easy. I didn't push it. I didn't try to go too fast. And that really set me up for success for the whole swim. You read those horror stories with people that they didn't even get past the swim because they just got anxiety or they got a mouthful of water or whatever. But the rolling start, I think, is extremely helpful. I think when you're not going out there with a pack of people of all different abilities, the rolling start is very, very helpful in getting that accomplished.
So whenever you get out of the swim here, you have to make sure you have your glasses, right?
Yeah. So last year you were actually there to help me out with my glasses. This year I entrusted the volunteers. I definitely expressed my concern and anxiety about my glasses because obviously if I don't have those, I'm going nowhere because I can't see a thing without them. So I made sure I took actually one of my bag stickers, and I had it on a plastic bag so that I could easily see it because I am blind. So obviously anyone that knows, the bag stickers are quite large in size, so you could see it right away. And the volunteers laughed at me because I had one of my bag stickers for my glasses. And I said, nope, they're easily, I can see it that way when I get out of the water. Unfortunately, when I got out of the water and I found my bag, the volunteer tried to help me. And I probably would have appreciated not getting the help because she couldn't get them out of the bag. I would have just taken them and ripped open the bag and ran with them. But she was actually trying to pull them out of the bag. So that took like it probably felt to me like it was a minute, but it was probably really just, a handful of seconds, but, I just wanted the glasses and just to go and run. But, at least they were there. Right. They were there in one piece.
Now, did you take advantage of the wetsuit strippers out there?
Yeah, I did something different this year though, because last year, I went and I allowed them to take it down and they asked me to sit on the ground. And that was a mess. One, because they couldn't get it off. And two, because I was so sandy that by the time, I had sand everywhere, when I sat down, that took so much time in transition trying to get all the sand off my feet and everything else to get my socks and cleats on. So this time I opted to stay standing and, I said, just rip it down to my ankles. And then I kicked out of it. And that actually, I think, saved time because I didn't have to get down and up again. But I also didn't have to spend so much time taking all the sand off of me. So,
yes, because they put it right there in the middle of the sand to make everybody sugar cookies before they go ride 112 miles.
Exactly.
That sounds like a great idea.
I chose to have them just bring it down to my ankles, and then I kicked out and grabbed it and ran.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great idea. Now, whenever you start making your half-mile run to T1, how does that go? I mean, is it carpeted this year?
Yep. There was a carpet the whole way. The one thing that we had to be careful of is because there was a significant amount of rain. The whole way, the volunteers kept saying, take it easy, because even though it was carpeted, there's quite a bit of turns, even when you're running back. It's not like just one straight shoot. And it just, because of the rain and the nature of the weather, it was still a little bit slippery, taking the turns and, that kind of thing. But ultimately, I think, they did the best that they could with the, conditions of where they were. But yeah, you had to be a little bit more careful on the run.
Okay. So you get to T1, you get your bag. How does your T1 go for you?
Unfortunately, T1 was not that great. I heard them call out my bike number, which was 1019. And it just so happens, that the volunteer was kind and thought she was bringing my bike, but it wasn't my bike. So I'm holding onto my bike thinking it was mine. I'm like, that's not my bike. So I had to run down and go get my own bike. And, she apologized and everything else. It happens. What are you going to do? So I grabbed my bike and, I ran on out with it. Probably could have been a little bit faster, obviously, if I had the bike kind of handed to me versus having to go get it. But other than that, it was fine. It was already misting when the bike started where I was at. So you just had to be careful because, the first part is a complete downhill. You pretty much come out and you're going straight downhill, and then you have like a little level, and then you go right downhill to a left-hand turn. So you have to, your heart rate's up. You just got out of the swim. You're excited that part's done. You're on the bike. You're trying to remember everything that you want to do, get your bearings together to get on the bike. But you have to go straight downhill right away. So I guess the most important thing there is absolutely 100% check your brakes before you even, leave for your swim. Because when you start on a hill, that could be the end of your race if you didn't do that. So
that makes sense. Now, did you have a strategy of how you wanted to attack the bike course?
I did have a strategy, and it went to hell very fast. And considering that first part of the bike, my strategy was to really focus on my strengths, which is downhills and flat course, and just keep my heart rate around 140 for the uphills, with keeping a high cadence, low gear. But that was not going to happen. I figured that out probably within the first 10 minutes of the bike. The wind started picking up. I was probably even before 10 minutes. I would say the first 5 minutes, you could feel the wind, and you did everything you could just to keep upright on the bike, never mind speed. It was just a matter of, keeping on the bike and not slipping with the roads being as wet as they were, staying off the paint, but yet staying to the right as far as you could. So yeah, it changed. The bike, the plan for the bike changed almost as soon as I got on it.
Okay. Now, I know you wrecked last year at Quasi. How was your confidence on the bike this year versus last year?
Well, as you know, I had a pretty significant fall, in Quasi. I was, again, one of my strengths was going downhill. And I hit a pothole going 41 miles per hour, and extremely lucky that not only did I finish the race, which probably wasn't the smartest thing for me to do that day, but I did. I finished the race. I got back on the bike, in the swim the very next day, even though you suggested that I shouldn't. I wasn't about to stop. So, I continued on just to keep my mental acuity going. I didn't want the bike to get the better of me. But as I shared with you, 2 days before I think we spoke, going out to Lake Placid this year, one of my friends, was going 34 miles an hour, hit a pothole, and really had significant damage. He was hospitalized, had lost 5 teeth, had a broken jaw, broken ribs, broken arm. So hearing that actually was, although it was difficult to hear and see, it was a nice reminder about how important it is to remember that it's a sport that you're supposed to enjoy and not get hurt in. So just to be very cautious and careful. So again, thinking of the Keene descent for Lake Placid, just making sure that I was safe. That was the number one priority. So timing, maybe not the greatest, but I think it actually just reminded me of how, dangerous it can be, and how you have to be smart, and maybe not every hill you go down just because you can go at 40, 45 miles an hour. Maybe you take it at 30. And I can tell you, even the pros this year, they took it much slower than they normally do. Just because of the weather conditions. You just couldn't take it faster, and be safe.
That makes sense. So for this course, how deep were the wheels that you're using?
Same wheels as last year, which I think was good for me because I didn't have to try to compensate or figure out anything more the wind definitely, was a contributing factor to that because, with your race wheels versus your training wheels, you're going to feel the wind, much more. And there were points literally I was on the side, like you just had to lean to the other side just to kind of fight the wind.
Okay. So you said you're trying to hit 140 on the bike ride for your heart rate?
Yeah, 140 on the hills. My average, I was, looking to stay under 120 for my average, which I was maintaining throughout my entire training. If I got to 140 on the hills, I knew that, I had to either, reduce my gear or I had to drink more because it was one or the other. It was either hydration or I wasn't being efficient. So I was very mindful of that.
Okay. Now, how was the quality of the road for this course?
They actually did a handful of areas where they actually repaved, and the new out and back was brand new. It was newly paved. I really, really, really liked the new out and back that was on Hazelton versus the Ossable Forks. I think almost everyone agreed that was a better out and back this time.
Okay. Now, as far as the road goes and on the bike ride, did you see a lot of flats?
There were actually quite a few. I could put a number on it and say that I probably saw at least 10 to 15 people, but based off of the feeds that you got after the race, there were people that said, there was one person that said they got 3, so I sometimes feel that that's the bike and not so much, the road conditions or anything else, because it's, challenging to think that if you had 1, God, having 3 just must be awful. But I didn't feel that the roads, were in any condition that would have caused a flat. But I did see a handful of flats on the side.
Okay. So as far as the bike goes, how do you know how hard to push in the earlier stages of the bike versus the later stages of the bike?
I think that all has to do with your training. Again, train as if you're going, as if you're going to race. So I did the same thing. Anytime that I trained, I really wanted to make sure that on the hills I was, keeping an average of 140 or lower. And then throughout the other sections, on flat sections, I could easily go 26, 27 miles an hour and still maintain, 120 heart rate. So that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to mimic what I was doing throughout training. It just didn't work out. The weather just did not allow for it this time. The areas, especially right before the Keene descent, is where I used to make up a lot of time. And you couldn't do it. The wind was just relentless. It just didn't allow you to. So unfortunately, the areas that I normally would be able to really gain some time on, I just couldn't do this year.
Okay. Now, did you put anything in your special needs this year?
Actually, I did things completely different from special needs. I didn't have special needs bags on any of the legs. I was very confident in my planning and preparation, and making sure that I had what I needed. And I also had a backup plan. I hate Gatorade. And it's what they offer out in the course. And I can't tell you enough about how much I hate the taste of it. I hate it. I don't like it at all. But I forced myself to use it throughout some of my training this year so that if I did lose my nutrition or something happened, I had trained with it. So I did make sure that I was able to use it. I didn't want to have to stop if I didn't need to. I think sometimes there's a huge backlog of people in your special needs area, and I didn't want to have to make that stop if I didn't need to. So I trained myself to drink the Kool-Aid on the course, and it worked. I only needed to grab a bottle and a half of Gatorade. I did the first half on the first loop, and then I did a full bottle on the second loop.
Okay. Now, as far as the bike ride goes, from miles like 80 to 100, how is your headspace in those miles?
I actually was so much better this year than last year. I bonked at mile 80 last year, which made the last, 32 miles pretty long, especially knowing that you still have to run a full marathon after that. This year around mile 80, I remember feeling really good. I was having some GI issues, that made me a little bit concerned. And I don't know where. I mean, I never had that through any of my training. And I just don't know what particularly caused it. Whether I think, like others, I was not the only one. I actually did vomit on the bike.
This year?
On my first loop. Right after the Keene descent, I got sick. I was not the only one. There were a lot of people that did. And I honestly and truthfully think it was the anxiety from that first 20 miles. That wind threw you around. Everyone was white knuckling it. It was extremely, I'm good on the bike. I'm probably not technically as good as I should be. But I'm comfortable enough on the bike that, normally I would have been okay, but this was ridiculous. The wind was just throwing you all over the place. And I honestly think, it just got me so nervous that I got sick. And I think from there I might have, caused a little bit of GI upset. So around mile 80, I felt good, but I was still kind of fighting off some of the GI irritation. But by the time I finished, I felt good. I mean, I pulled out of, transition from the bike to the run, and I never felt uncomfortable. I was great. I was perfect. So I definitely had good nutrition this time. I was using Perfect bars to substitute the liquid nutrition. So I got in probably close to about another 700 calories with those, and I felt good.
Okay. Now, the last mile or two of the bike ride, were you doing anything to start preparing you to start running?
Chugging liquids. I mean, I was probably every 2 minutes or so, I was just getting in as much liquid as I could. Really just trying to get myself ready for the run. I don't drink a lot. Actually, when I train dry, for anything that's under 2 hours. So, I'm used to that, but I do know that you can't go a full marathon without drinking, to actually have a good run. So I chugged quite a bit, and I knew mentally going into the run that I was going to stop at every water station, or not stop, but at least grab something to drink at every water station, which I did. Every single time I went past an aid station, at bare minimum, I grabbed water. And then I'll say maybe I probably grabbed Gatorade between 5 and 8 times throughout the race, but primarily just water.
Okay. Now, how did T2 go for you?
T2 went pretty smooth. I did decide last year, I felt very uncomfortable running in my kit. Not because the kit was uncomfortable, but because I'm a profuse sweater. So I was soaking wet getting off the bike last year, and running in a soaking wet kit was just not ideal. So I decided that I was going to take the extra minute or two, whatever it was, and completely change. The volunteer, they see it all, but, just got down and changed as quickly as possible. I threw on a new pair of, compression shorts, a tank top, got my sneakers on. I had to change my socks because they were soaking wet. I normally don't do that, but I did this year. Changed my socks, got my shoes on, put my belt on, and off I went.
Okay. Now, did you use the bathroom at all on the bike ride?
On the bike.
Okay.
Yeah, no need to stop. There's a couple of things that I'll recommend for anyone that may have issues with that. One, what goes in is going to come out, whether, it's the most sterile thing you could possibly do. I feel bad for anyone that, might be behind me, but I think I use proper etiquette. Getting on and off the bike, that could mean whether or not for someone that is nearing the bike cutoff, whether they make it or not. So, you lose momentum. I think mentally you kind of, lose a little bit. So if you can find a way to, keep on trucking and go to the bathroom. It also, I think last year limited how much I drank because I was fearful that I was going to have to go to the bathroom, where this year it was a matter of how much can I drink? Just keep getting it in. Doesn't matter how much. Just keep drinking. If I don't need it, my body's going to get rid of it. So just keep drinking. I will tell you, I probably went to the bathroom, I'd say at least 8-9 times.
Wow. Just on the bike ride?
Just on the bike ride.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
The other thing I was going to say in terms of asking about transition, one of the things that I was a tidbit that I learned from someone else, to get yourself mentally ready to go from the bike to the run, because, you're anxious and you want to get out there and you want to start the run, and you really want to keep your run slow to begin with. You want to make sure that your heart rate, doesn't spike, which is something I have a real difficult time with anytime that I go run. It usually shoots right to 170, no matter what, whether I come right off the bike or whether I start a brand new fresh run or what have you. I decided that I was going to focus, it sounds ridiculous, but focus on getting my hair done as I was leaving transition. So taking the time to run and like put my ponytail in and put my visor on and that kind of thing forced me to run slow. And it got me so that my heart rate was stable. I was at a 140 almost the entire time, which that's like just the top of my zone 1 for a run. So for me to have a run with 1,000 feet of elevation and to maintain an average of 140 for the run, doing an 8:30, 8:45 pace, I have to say I nailed it. I nailed the run this year. The last 5 miles were a bit of a challenge for me, but other than that, considering how the bike went, I definitely nailed the run.
Okay. Now, with the run, how did the first few miles go for you?
Great. I felt fantastic. I remember last year thinking in the first mile, there's no way in hell I am going to make 26 miles. I felt just beat. And it took me quite some time. I remember seeing you on the way back of the first loop thinking, I don't even know how I'm going to do this. I handed you my water bottle. I'm like, I don't want to drink anymore. I wasn't taking anything in. I felt like garbage. This year here, I felt like my feet didn't even touch the ground. I felt great the entire time. The only thing that I had, like I said, mile 21, started getting some weird pain in my left hip. And I just kind of walked it out through one of the aid stations, and picked it back up again, and I was fine. But my pace went down probably about 30 seconds a mile. So, it wasn't where I wanted to be for the last 5 miles, but, aside from that, even with that little bit of discomfort, I still felt really good. Like I came down that last part of Mirror Lake Drive and I had no pain at all. And I took that last 2 miles and I was feeling good. I was just really happy with my run.
Good. Now, whenever you checked in for the race, did you get any bracelets to give to volunteers or spectators?
Yeah. I had the one, and there was definitely a handful of volunteers that I probably would have liked to have given it to, but, sad to say, mentally, I wasn't thinking that way, but, I'm the type of person, no matter what race it is, whether it's Ironman, whether it's half, whether it's, Olympic, it's a sprint, all the police officers, all the volunteers that are out there, anytime that they like clap or they give you some type of incentive, I'll say 99% of the time, I always give a thank you. I say it out loud and really just appreciate the fact that they're all out there. So maybe I didn't pass along, the bracelet, but throughout the entire course, just saying thank you to everyone. So that's what I do. That's what makes me feel good. I guess everyone's a little bit different, but that's how I take it.
Okay. So as far as the run goes, what was the funniest thing that you saw on course?
Oh man, there were some characters out there this time. There was a person that was running that had on a full orange leotard, covered head, everything. The only thing you could see was his eyes and his mouth. But he was running in a full orange leotard. Why you would want to do that, I have no idea, especially when they said it was going to be like 85 degrees and humid. But this gentleman did it. They were, like usual, in the same spot every year with Lake Placid. There was a bunch of guys that stand out there in barely bathing suits and they, have some comical things to say and you just have to keep on running. And there was a lot of people and I really don't understand this. I'd love someone to tell me why someone would choose an all white kit. But sure enough, I probably saw like 3 or 4 this year. And I just want to ask why. When you have like chocolate goos and it's all over you or you can see right through them, I just don't get it. Like lose the white kits. Stop wearing them. It's awful. Like
they need to stop making them altogether.
No one wants to see it. You don't look good in it. I don't care how thin or how big you are. You don't look good in it. Just stop wearing them.
So I know with this course, the hills are on the left side of the course near the race site. And then towards the right side of the course, it's mostly flat with a few rollers back there. And it keeps on winding around on the road forever amongst the trees.
Yeah.
How hard was that mentally the second time around?
This year I was so fortunate on, so the part that you were talking about that winds is called River Road. And it's actually quite beautiful, very serene, very peaceful. They don't allow anyone down there. So unless you're going to walk, there are no spectators down there. So your only real support is your fellow athletes that are running with you. And just like last year, Missy was like, one of my training partners, was like 2 miles ahead of me. So I always mentally have it out, like, look for Missy, give her a high five when we go by. So I have something kind of in my head, that I'm thinking about, but I was so fortunate for this year. On River Road, probably not even a quarter mile into that particular run, which, is mile like 2.5 to 6. And then obviously on the way back, it's mile 6 to 10, that you're on River Road. So around mile 2.5, I, was talking with another athlete just as I was going by, and, we started talking. He kept up with me, and we actually ran the entire rest of the race together. We paced each other. So we talked about what we wanted our pace to be. He's like, oh, I feel awful on the bike and I wanted to do better. And he's like, and I don't know how this run's going to go. I'm not even sure I'm going to finish. And I'm like, come on, let's do it. Let's stick together. Let's go. And I gave him like knuckles, and we did. We ran the whole thing together, and I know everything about him. We've connected after the race and everything else. It was great. So I think having him, we talked the entire run. So I think it just made it go by so much faster. And we were talking about all the other things that we wanted to do and accomplish. And it was like talking to a friend, but running at the same time. It was great. Wow. It was fantastic.
So
the run was easily my favorite part of this whole event, both years. This run this year was the best leg between the 2 years combined. Wow. I really enjoyed it.
Now, if we take a look at miles 20 through 25, how was that for you?
20 through 25 was a bit of a struggle. It was a lot more mental. Kind of, I got this, I'm going to do it. It's 5 miles left. So every time I have like 5 miles left, I think of the same 5 miles that I run at home, and I just put it in my head, and I'm like, all right, 5 miles. It's, to the end of the street and back. That's it. Like, that's all you got. You get to the end of the street and back. I'm like, once you do this, your family's going to be there. You're going to run run across the line. I knew it was my last one for a while. So I had that kind of in my head, and just thinking, I'm like, you can push through this. Just keep drinking, keep your pace, keep your heart rate down, keep relaxed. I just kept telling myself that. I saw 2 of my teammates, actually, I lapped them. They were finishing their first lap. And I came upon them from behind, and, took a minute just to kind of like give them a quick hug and a high five and give them some extra, motivation. And they told me, come on, go home, get your race done. And so seeing them on the course was really helpful too. Especially like you said, the whole back 5 is climbing. I mean, your last 5 miles, you're pretty much climbing. You have those, 3 sections of hills, that you have to get up, and, once you do that, you get onto Mirror Lake Drive, and it's flat, and then you cruise right into Olympic Stadium. So I think in my head, I just knew what I had ahead of me, and just, took one piece at a time. Get up this hill, get up the next hill, get up the third hill, take that right onto Mirror Lake Drive, out and back, and then you're in Olympic Stadium. So just keep playing it over and over in your head, and you know the light's there, so you just keep going.
Okay. Now, you get to the spot where you can take the right into the stadium, or go straight into your second loop. Taking that right into the stadium, how was that for you?
It's there. This year is kind of funny because I had, friends and family out in the spectator area. And right as you were to take the right, I had seen one of my friends. I can hear his voice, like you can hear through anyone. It just pierces the crowd. And he was screaming at me, Gina, go, go, go. And I was like, why are you screaming at me? I don't get it. Like, I'm right here. Like, I don't understand why you're yelling. Come to find out, based off of the timing chips, it appeared that I was 10 seconds off from hitting 5th place. So he was trying to get me to gain 10 seconds on the person ahead of me. Unfortunately, that person started the swim 5 minutes later than I did. So really, it wasn't a matter of 10 seconds. It was 5 minutes and 10 seconds. But he thought if I just kind of put in an extra gear to get that 10 seconds and clip the 5th spot. So that's why he was yelling at me so much. So it was a little, I don't want to say it was distracting, but I was trying to figure out what was going on. And then in my head, I was thinking, maybe I'm like 10 seconds from clipping 12 hours. So, or a handful of seconds from clipping the 12-hour marker, because you knew that before my goal was to sub 12. So I'm like, well, I better put it into overdrive. I'm like, if I'm that close to getting 12 hours, because I really didn't think I was anywhere close. I didn't know what my time was. So I was like, maybe I'm close to getting 12 hours. So I picked it up. And as I turned into the first bend of Olympic Stadium, you can see the timing clock. And the first thing I saw is it said 12:02 and change. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how early did I start after the pros? I said, I had to have started at least 10 minutes after the pros, 10, 15 minutes after the pros. I'm like, I got this. I got sub 12. And at that point, I was just like beside myself, because I really thought I lost it on the bike. I didn't know how long I was on the bike for. I never looked. So I really didn't know. And then when I saw the 12:02 marker, I'm like, oh my God, I did it. I got sub 12. Little did I know at that point that I actually got 11:43, which was well below 12. So that was pretty cool. That was nice.
So after you crossed the finish line, what did you do next?
The first thing I did when I crossed the finish line is I saw my oldest son on the right. I went over and I gave him a big hug. And then the volunteers came and grabbed me, and they're like, come on, you got to get your medal and blah, blah, blah. And as I walked over, it was awesome. Somehow or another, my younger son, they allowed in, and he was allowed to give me my medal. So when I saw him at the line and he gave me my medal, of course I lost it. It was just very emotional. I picked him up, and he's like, I can't believe you could pick me up. Like, you have energy to pick me up. And I picked him up and saw him, and then I went over, and at that point I had seen my boyfriend off to the other side. So I went and I saw him and gave him a big hug. So it was just, some of the stuff you can't script it. It's like the way it happens. It's perfect. So it was great.
Wow. So how was your recovery process?
Oh, I felt great. After I did have a little discomfort in my big toe on my left-hand side. I don't know why. I felt fine. It never bothered me during the run. It was actually after the run was over that I felt it. I think some of it may have actually had to do with the bike, because my feet were soaking wet, that maybe there was just some additional friction that I wouldn't normally have had. But the next day I swam, felt great. The day after that I went for a bike ride, felt great. Today I did a swim bike run, felt great. So yeah, no issues at all. No soreness, no stiffness. We climbed a mountain. We did a trail hike. 2 days later, we did a trail hike. Felt great. No problems.
Nice.
Excellent. Yeah.
So looking back on it, how well prepared for this race do you think you were?
Definitely much better prepared mentally this time, just because you knew that you did it. So I think all of those questions of, can you do this? Am I able to? Am I going to be able to finish? Am I going to meet all the cutoffs? I don't want to crash, that kind of stuff. All of that kind of was, not as big of an issue this year. Nutrition wise, definitely that was a huge focus of mine. You and I talked about that after I finished last year, that, to do it again, I needed to get that down, because that just was not good last year. So I think there's still room to improve there, but I did a lot better with my nutrition this year. And then physically, I was really, really happy. I didn't have any major issues throughout the entire training this year, with any ailments, any pains, any pulls, any stretches, any falls, anything. So, I think I had a really clean, training period that really just set me up physically for success for the for the full.
Okay. If you could change one thing about your race before you do it, what would you change?
You mean this race, or if I was to do it again?
This race.
Leading up to the race or actual race day?
Either one.
There was definitely some execution issues on the bike. I don't think I trained the way I should have on some of the longer rides. Some of that was due to the fact that I was on the trainer. I think it might have been a little bit better if I could have gotten on the road for some of those 5-hour rides. I would have liked to have focused more on keeping my cadence above 90, 95, because that's what I need to do on the hills. I now know that I'm not as strong on the hills. So the one way to keep efficient is to, keep the cadence up, keep the resistance down. That just is more efficient for me. And I probably should have trained a little bit more like that. During the race day, you can always go back and say, what if I did this, if I did that. The swim, I should have seated myself a little bit earlier. But we talked about that already in terms of why I didn't. Looking back now, I would have liked to have done that. On the bike, I think if the weather was a little bit different, I could have capitalized on some of the areas that were more of my strengths versus, having them all of a sudden become a weakness just because of the weather. But, if you look at it from that perspective, everyone had the same weather conditions. So you can't really say, maybe I would have placed 4th or 3rd if I had better weather, because everyone had the same weather. Technically, I wish I was a little bit better with wind, in terms of how to compensate a bit. I think I probably could have rode better if I had the opportunity to kind of practice that a bit more. But, I guess that's just with experience. The run, honestly, I had an amazing run. For me personally, I had a really good run. So, the only thing I could have said differently on that is whatever it is that I did to tweak my left hip, around mile 21, if I could have taken that back or figured that out, I would like to have changed that, but, that's about it.
Okay. Now, what's something that you learned from this race that you'd like to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
I think practicing the course is definitely key. I don't think you need to run the course. I think if you drive it, it's not, it's 2 loops of 13. So you could run it if you wanted to, but I think even driving it just to kind of see. River Road is really long. So when you get on it, it feels like it never ends. So I think mentally you just need to prepare yourself for that, especially the hill climb back up. That's a tough segment and you got to do that twice. So preparing for that. The swim, it's a matter of, preference. If, I learned to bilateral swim this past year. So that was, I think, a huge help for me. But with Mirror Lake, you have the cord there for the full length. I would highly recommend, if you can, stay on the inside of the buoys. I think that's helpful. A majority of the people stay on the outside and there's not too many people on the inside. So the only thing you have to do is find a way to get on the inside for when you have to pull the red buoys. And a lot of people don't do it to take advantage of the open space. I think that's what you can do. On the bike, the back half, a lot of people are concerned about the amount of elevation that you're climbing, but really it's the first 16 miles. That's where the elevation is really concentrated. The back half is undulating. So even though you have some really good climbs, you have a lot that breaks it up. The first 16 miles, you're climbing almost the entire time. You may not feel it. It may not look like it, but you are. That's all you're doing for the first 16 miles. So I think, for people to recognize that, it's a slow climb. It's the start of the race. You're kind of pumped. You're ready to go. You might go out too hard and that could be your fall. So just take those first 16 miles, with caution.
Okay. So as far as Ironman making your race experience better as an athlete, how could they do that?
I don't know that Ironman would do anything for me personally. I think it's really the athlete and what they want to do, what they want to get out of it. The venue and the organized race group or what have you. I think that's secondary. I think as long as they make the courses safe for the athletes, that's really all they can do for you. You have to do everything else. You have to put the training in. You have to decide what it is that you want out of it. You have to decide if you just want to finish, or if you want to finish at a particular time, or you want to, whatever it is that your goal is. And that's really up to you. I'm a firm believer. It's what you put into it, you're going to get out. I don't think anyone owes you anything, or anyone is going to make things better for you. I think the only thing that the race organizers and the race, course has is make sure it's safe. That's it. I think that's their only obligation.
And make it the right distance.
I will say that's another piece that I capitalized on. Take the shortest course. Some people, especially on River Road, how you were saying it's that significant winding road. Some people cover right on the side. Do you know how many more miles you're running by staying right on the side? No, stay on the yellow line. What's the shortest distance between two places? That's how they measure the 26.2.
They don't measure.
Yes, they don't measure it on the sidelines. They measure it on the shortest distance. So make sure you do that. Make sure you're cutting off and you're running the shortest distance. Don't run any more than you have to.
Okay. So for first timers doing this race next year, what advice would you give them?
I think be realistic about your goals. Understand that your goals may change the day before the race, depending on the weather, the conditions. Making sure that you've practiced what you plan to do for race day. Don't try anything new, which I know is the comments that everyone makes, but really don't try anything new, including down to changing your bike. If something on your bike doesn't need to be fixed for the race, don't fix it. Leave it alone. If it's worked for you for your last 120-mile bike ride, it's going to work for you for this coming 112 bike ride. Same thing with your sneakers. Don't put on a brand new pair. Make sure you've run in them a couple times, that there's no manufacturer's defect or anything like that. So keep them comfortable. Run and train in the clothing that you plan on wearing for race day. Don't put on anything new. Glide was a huge help this time in my wetsuit. I made sure that I lathered in Glide this time. I never had issues with my wetsuit up until the full Ironman. It was always fine. I think just over time, being in the water for that length of time, the Glide was definitely necessary. So I made sure I put that on. Just the same stuff that everyone always says. Don't try anything new. Whatever you're going to do for race day, make sure you've trained with.
Okay. So we covered a lot. Do you have anything else to add about your race?
Yeah, I think what other people need to remember, if it's their first race, even if it's their second race, their full Ironman, expect the wave of emotions. That was something I did not expect last year. This year I anticipated it. And even though I anticipated it, it still was a huge shock when it comes Monday morning. You wake up and you're not sure how you're going to feel. Am I going to feel stiff physically? Forget the physical. It's emotional. You just spend however long, 6, 7, 8 months of training, living and breathing by a plan, sacrificing, making choices that are hard to make, all to get to this one day. And then it's like people, when they say their wedding day, they take all this time to plan. And then in a flash of, light, it's gone. It's done. So you wake up Monday morning and you're like, what do I do now? What's next kind of thing. So I think you need to be prepared for that. And make sure that your decision is, made when you're not emotional. Again, I signed up for Lake Placid again a handful of days after last year. And then there was a part throughout my training this past year that I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this again? And I think it's because I made that decision to sign up so quickly after the race on an emotional high. So this year I knew for a fact I wanted to. Monday morning came around. I was like, I want to do Lake Placid 2019. I want to go out. I want to do this again. I want to feel this. And then I had to kind of remember what it was like, in February of this year, when I was dreading going out and shoveling 2 feet of snow to make it to the pool and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't want that weight on me. So you have to remember those types of things, because it's a hard, long training season if you just if you're dreading workouts and that kind of thing. Am I happy that I did it? Absolutely. Would I take anything back or change anything? No, it was great. I loved every ounce of race day, like loved it, loved it. So glad I did it. It means a lot to me in many, many ways. But it's got to be personal for everyone. So.
Okay. So I know you're doing a marathon later this year. Aside from that, what are you doing next?
So I have a couple, I do one, sprint triathlon every year since I've been triathloning. That is, it's for a fundraiser, which I always enjoy doing. So I have a couple sprints lined up. I'm toggling between whether or not I'll do another half Ironman before the season's done. I think I want to do it, but I'm just trying to make some decisions as to whether or not I have like the time, based off of when the races are. My focus is the marathon. I want to qualify for Boston this year. It's been 5 years since I ran Boston, so I'd like to do that again, for this upcoming year. And just take some time. 2 years straight Ironmans. Really, I only took about maybe 3 weeks off in between where I just didn't really have a plan, or a plan in my head or whatever. So, it'd be nice just to not feel like every day I have this, I got to get this done. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. So aside from going back to Boston, what races are on your bucket list?
I'd actually like to do some destination ones. Every triathlon I've done has all been local, anything within driving distance. So my training partner and I, we said, you know what, let's make next year fun. Let's do something different. Let's go somewhere and actually do a race. She qualified for Kona, so she's going somewhere before I get there. But, I think next year, that's going to be something we're going to want to do. We'll pick a race somewhere different and try something different. We both want to do a flat course. We want to see how that is, because anything that we do around here has lots of hills, lots of hills. I haven't done any flat courses. I don't even know what it's like to ride or run on a flat course. The only flat I know is the water. That's about as flat as it gets around here. So it'd be nice to do a flat course and see how we compare.
Yeah. Ironman Texas is all flat for the most part.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that. We talked about Florida and Texas. I lived in Arizona for a while, so I thought about even doing Tempe. Just something different. Just get out there and do a destination one and see how that goes. So
nice. So how can athletes follow you?
Facebook is the only real way. I'm on Strava. That's about it.
Okay. Well, I only have one more question for you, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
Feeling good. I think every race is going to be different depending on what's going on a given day, whether it be weather, whether it be the number of participants taking place. It could be anything. The roads could just be a little anything. It's just feeling good. That all really is attributed to, depending on the length of the race, whether it's a week before, your training throughout the entire time, but your nutrition, getting a good night of sleep, that kind of thing. So perfect race is if I can cross the line and I feel good and I don't have any ailments and I didn't bonk on my nutrition or I didn't get like some type of pain or ailment or that kind of thing. That's a perfect race.
Okay. Well, Gina, I just want to take a minute and thank you for your time today. I've enjoyed hearing about your race experience at Lake Placid. I look forward to following you in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good day, okay?
Hey.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.